chapel had never felt so quiet. Rows of police officers stood shoulder to shoulder in their dark navy dress uniforms, their polished badges catching the soft light pouring through the stained glass windows. Outside rain tapped gently against the roof, as if even the sky had come warm. At the front of the room rested the flag-draped casket of Officer Ryan Foster, a respected canine handler who had dedicated nearly 18 years of his life to the Brookhaven Police Department. Ryan had survived dangerous arrests, armed standoffs, hostage rescues, and countless nights chasing violent fugitives through dark streets. No one imagined his final call would become his last. White lilies surrounded the casket, filling the chapel with their delicate fragrance. Beside them stood Ryan's framed portrait, showing the familiar smile that had comforted victims, encouraged young officers, and inspired everyone who worked beside him. But no one in the chapel was looking at the flowers. Every eye was fixed on one extraordinary sight. Inside the open casket lay Shadow. The 7-year-old German Shepherd had climbed in moments before the ceremony began. Now he rested quietly against Ryan's chest. His head lay across his handler's folded hands. His breathing was slow. His eyes never left Ryan's face. Nobody had placed him there. Nobody could persuade him to leave. Officer Emily Ross, one of Ryan's closest friends, stepped forward carefully. "Come on, Shadow," she whispered. The German Shepherd didn't move. She reached toward his harness. Immediately Shadow let out a low warning growl. Not aggressive, not threatening. Protective. Emily slowly withdrew her hand. "I've never seen him like this." Captain Ethan Brooks watched silently from the front row. During his 30 years in law enforcement, he had attended dozens of police funerals. He had seen loyal canines whine beside caskets. He had seen them refuse food. He had seen them search every room for partners who would never return. But he had never seen one guard a coffin. "It's grief," one officer murmured quietly. Another nodded. They were together almost every day for 7 years. Most people accepted that explanation. After all, everyone knew Ryan and Shadow shared an extraordinary bond. Ryan had personally selected Shadow as a young recruit from the Police Canine Academy. While other trainers considered the energetic German Shepherd too stubborn, Ryan saw something different: patience, intelligence, heart. He spent nearly a year training Shadow himself. They learned together, failed together, succeeded together. Soon, they became one of Brookhaven's most respected canine teams. Shadow had located missing children, tracked dangerous suspects through forests, found elderly people lost during winter storms. Twice, he had saved Ryan's life. Ryan often joked at the station, "I don't train Shadow. He trains me." The memory brought painful smiles across the room. Near the back of the chapel stood Dr. Emma Carter, the department's canine behavior specialist. She quietly observed Shadow from a distance. Something about his posture troubled her. His ears weren't pinned back like a grieving dog. His breathing wasn't uneven. He wasn't trembling. Instead, he was watching, protecting, waiting. She slowly approached Captain Brooks. "This isn't normal." The captain looked toward her. "What do you mean?" Emma kept her voice low. "He's not behaving like a dog that's simply mourning." Brooks frowned. "What do you see?" "He isn't focused on Ryan." The captain looked surprised. "He's lying on him." "Yes." Emma nodded. "But he's watching everyone else." The captain looked again. Only then did he notice it. Shadow wasn't staring at Ryan's face anymore. His eyes moved slowly around the chapel. Every person, every movement, every sound, as though evaluating every individual who entered the room, almost, like a guard protecting someone still alive. At that moment, the funeral director quietly announced that the service would begin. The honor guard stepped into position. The room fell silent. A bugler prepared to play. Still, Shadow never moved. Officer David Miller tried one last time. He knelt beside the casket. "Shadow." The dog flicked one ear. "Buddy, come here." Nothing. David reached gently toward the leash attached to Shadow's harness. Suddenly, Shadow lifted his head. A deep growl rolled through the silent chapel. Every officer froze. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried unmistakable purpose. Shadow wasn't warning David, his eyes were fixed somewhere behind him. Captain Brooks slowly turned around. A man had just entered through the rear doors. Lieutenant Marcus Hale. He had arrived late, apologizing quietly as he removed his rain-soaked hat. Most people barely noticed him. Shadow did. The German shepherd's entire body stiffened. Every muscle tightened. His ears pointed forward. His nose lifted into the air. Then, for the first time since climbing into the casket, Shadow stood. He remained inside, beside Ryan's body, but he never looked away from Lieutenant Hale. A second growl echoed through the chapel. Longer this time. Stronger. The room fell into uneasy silence. Lieutenant Hale stopped walking. His face lost color. Captain Brooks glanced between the officer and the dog, then toward Dr. Emma Carter. She didn't say a word. She simply whispered, "That isn't grief. That's recognition." 3 days before the funeral, before the folded flag rested atop Ryan Foster's casket, and before Shadow refused to leave his partner's side life at the Brookhaven Police Department, appeared completely ordinary. The station buzzed with the familiar sounds of ringing phones, radio dispatches, and officers preparing for another busy shift. Ryan arrived just before 7 that morning, with a coffee in one hand and Shadow walking confidently beside him. The German shepherd greeted several officers with a gentle wag of his tail before sitting beside Ryan's desk exactly where he always did. Morning buddy Officer Emily Ross smiled, scratching behind Shadow's ears. Normally, the dog would lean into the attention. This morning he didn't. Instead, he lifted his head and stared toward the hallway leading to the command offices. Emily noticed immediately. "What's wrong with him?" Ryan glanced up from his paperwork. "I wish I knew." He looked down at Shadow. For 2 days, he's been acting different. Different how he barely sleeps. Ryan sighed. He keeps walking around the house at night. He'll stand by the windows for 20 minutes without moving. Emily frowned. "Maybe he heard wildlife. I thought so too." Ryan shook his head, but every time I checked outside, nothing was there. Shadow suddenly stood. His ears shot forward. Someone was approaching. A few seconds later, Lieutenant Marcus Hale walked through the hallway carrying a folder under one arm. As he passed Ryan's desk, Shadow quietly stepped in front of his handler. Not aggressively, simply blocking the path. Ryan gently rested a hand on Shadow's back. "Easy." The dog never took his eyes off Hale. Marcus forced a smile, still keeping everyone safe. Shadow the German shepherd answered with absolute silence. His amber eyes followed the lieutenant until he disappeared into his office. Emily watched the exchange. "That's strange." Ryan nodded slowly. "Yesterday he did exactly the same thing." "You think he doesn't like Hale?" Ryan shrugged. Shadow has never reacted to another officer before, and he's worked with Marcus dozens of times. The conversation ended when dispatch announced the morning briefing. Inside the conference room, officers gathered around a large digital map displaying patrol assignments. Captain Ethan Brooks reviewed overnight incidents while everyone took notes. Shadow lay quietly beside Ryan's chair for most of the meeting. Then Lieutenant Hale entered. The transformation was immediate. Shadow stood. His body became rigid. Every muscle tightened. A low rumble vibrated deep inside his chest. Not loud enough to interrupt the meeting, but impossible for Ryan not to notice. "Shadow!" The command came softly. Instantly, the dog sat down, perfectly obedient. Yet his eyes never left Hale. Captain Brooks paused mid-sentence. "You all right over there?" Ryan smiled awkwardly. "Sorry, Captain, I don't know what's gotten into him lately." Brooks shrugged. Dogs have off days. The meeting continued. But Ryan couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing inside him. After briefing, he decided to schedule a veterinary examination for the following afternoon. Maybe Shadow was in pain. Maybe he was developing hearing problems. There had to be an explanation, because this wasn't the dog he knew. Later that afternoon, Ryan and Shadow responded to a report of suspicious activity near an abandoned shipping district on the edge of the city. The warehouses had been empty for years, making them popular with trespassers and vandals. As soon as Ryan parked the patrol, SUV Shadow refused to jump out. That had never happened before. Come on. Ryan opened the rear door. Shadow remained inside. His ears flattened, his breathing quickened. Ryan crouched beside him. "What is it?" The German shepherd stared toward the abandoned buildings. Then he looked back at Ryan. A soft whine escaped his throat. It wasn't fear. It sounded almost like pleading. Ryan clipped on the leash. Shadow stepped out reluctantly. Every few feet, he stopped. Sniffed no trespassers, no stolen property. Dispatch eventually cleared the call. Driving back to the station, Ryan reached across the center console and rubbed Shadow's neck. "You've been trying to tell me something." Shadow rested his head against the seat but didn't close his eyes. That evening Ryan skipped dinner with friends and drove home early. Rain had begun falling, covering the streets with a thin layer of silver. Inside the house, Shadow didn't touch his food. Instead, he paced from window to window, stopping each time to stare into the darkness outside. Ryan finally walked onto the front porch. The neighborhood was completely still. Street lights reflected off the wet pavement. No people, no vehicles. Nothing looked unusual. Yet Shadow suddenly rushed past him and stood at the edge of the driveway. The dog sniffed the air intensely, then turned toward Ryan. His expression was one Ryan had seen only twice before. The first time, Shadow had located a missing child moments before the boy was found unconscious in the woods. The second time, he had detected an armed suspect hiding inside a school building. It was the look that meant only one thing. Danger was close. Ryan knelt beside him and whispered quietly, "I don't know what you're trying to warn me about, but I promise we'll figure it out tomorrow." Neither of them realized there would never be a tomorrow. The next evening began like hundreds of other patrols. Ryan Foster and Shadow had worked together. The rain had stopped leaving the streets of Brookhaven slick beneath the glow of streetlights. A cool breeze drifted through the city as Ryan steered the patrol SUV through quiet neighborhoods, finishing routine patrol checks. Shadow sat in the passenger compartment behind him, unusually silent. Normally the German shepherd enjoyed patrol nights. His ears stayed relaxed, and he often watched passing cars with calm curiosity. Tonight was different. Every few minutes, Shadow lifted his nose toward the air vents, as though trying to catch a scent that wasn't there. Ryan glanced into the rearview mirror. "You still haven't relaxed." Shadow met his eyes for only a second before looking back out the window. Ryan smiled sadly. "I'll take you to Dr. Carter first thing tomorrow." At exactly 9:48 p.m., the radio suddenly crackled. Unit 12 respond to a possible break-in at the Old Harbor Freight Warehouse on East River Road. Anonymous caller reports suspicious activity inside. Ryan reached for the microphone. Unit 12 responding. Dispatch confirmed. "No additional units available. You're the closest." Ryan sighed quietly. "Looks like it's just us again." He turned the patrol vehicle toward the industrial district. Behind him, Shadow immediately stood. His ears pointed forward. His breathing became faster. The closer they drove to the abandoned warehouses, the more anxious the dog became. When they finally parked outside the enormous brick building, Shadow refused to leave the vehicle. Ryan opened the rear door. "Come on, partner." The German shepherd remained frozen. His paws stayed firmly planted. Ryan had never seen him hesitate before entering a search area, not once in 7 years. He crouched beside the dog. "What is it?" Shadow looked toward the warehouse, then back at Ryan. A soft, desperate whine escaped his throat. Ryan gently rubbed behind his ears. "I know. I've got a bad feeling too." After several seconds, Shadow slowly climbed out. Instead of walking confidently ahead, he stayed pressed against Ryan's side. Every few yards he stopped to sniff the air. The entire industrial complex was silent. Broken windows reflected moonlight. Rusted metal doors creaked gently in the wind. Tall weeds pushed through cracked pavement. Ryan switched on his flashlight. Brookhaven Police. If anyone's inside, announce yourself. No answer. Only silence. Shadow suddenly stopped walking. His body stiffened. His eyes focused on the darkness beyond a stack of abandoned shipping containers. Ryan noticed immediately. "What do you have?" The German shepherd let out a low growl, not loud, just enough to warn. Ryan slowly approached the containers. His flashlight swept across empty pallets, rusted barrels, and broken machinery. Nothing. He stepped farther inside. Shadow grabbed the back of Ryan's jacket with his teeth, not aggressively, firmly, pulling him backward. Ryan turned in surprise. "Shadow!" The dog refused to let go. For several long seconds they remained frozen. Then a metallic click echoed somewhere inside the warehouse. Ryan's expression changed. He recognized the sound instantly. Someone had just chambered around a police show. Yourself. The answer came with a deafening gunshot. Glass exploded above Ryan's head. Shadow lunged forward, knocking Ryan behind a concrete support pillar just as another bullet struck the wall. Fragments of concrete scattered across the floor. Ryan reached for his radio. "Officer needs immediate." The transmission ended abruptly. A powerful explosion erupted from the far end of the warehouse. The blast wave threw Ryan several feet across the concrete floor. His flashlight spun into darkness. Smoke filled the building. Shadow regained his footing almost instantly. Ignoring the falling debris, he sprinted toward Ryan. The officer struggled to breathe. Blood stained the front of his uniform. His radio lay shattered nearby. Shadow whined desperately, nudging Ryan's shoulder with his nose. Ryan forced his eyes open. His breathing had become painfully shallow. Iazi. The German shepherd barked once, then twice. Loud enough for anyone nearby to hear, but no one answered. Ryan slowly reached out with trembling fingers and rested his hand against Shadow's neck. His voice was barely audible. "Listen." Shadow leaned closer. "If anything happens." Ryan coughed violently. "Don't stop." His hand slipped from the dog's collar. Shadow nudged him again, harder this time, as though refusing to accept what was happening. Then he heard footsteps. Someone was still inside the warehouse, hidden by the smoke. A shadow moved between the broken support beams. The figure paused for only a second, just long enough for Shadow to catch the scent. The German shepherd growled deeply. The stranger looked directly toward them before disappearing through a side exit into the darkness. Shadow memorized everything: the scent, the walk, the sound of the footsteps. He would never forget them. Minutes later, distant sirens finally echoed through the night. Backup officers rushed inside the warehouse. They found Ryan lying motionless beside the collapsed pillar. Shadow stood over him, covered in dust, covered in blood that wasn't his own. The German shepherd refused to leave Ryan's side. No officer could pull him away. No command could make him move. Because somewhere beyond the flashing lights, the scent of the man responsible still lingered in the night. And Shadow had already made a silent promise he would find him. The funeral chapel remained wrapped in silence after Shadow's second growl. No one spoke. No one dared move. The German shepherd stood inside Ryan Foster's casket, every muscle rigid, his amber eyes fixed on Lieutenant Marcus Hale near the back of the room. Rain tapped softly against the stained glass windows, but inside even that sound seemed distant. Captain Ethan Brooks slowly turned toward Hale. Lieutenant Hale forced a nervous smile. "I didn't mean to interrupt." He took one careful step forward. Shadow's growl deepened instantly. The sound rolled through the chapel like distant thunder. Officer Emily Ross stared in disbelief. He's never reacted to Marcus before. Neither had anyone else. Shadow had worked around hundreds of officers during his career. Detectives, deputies, federal agents, firefighters, paramedics. He had always remained calm and disciplined. Today was different. Dr. Emma Carter stepped closer to the casket without taking her eyes off the dog. "Nobody approach him," she said quietly. Captain Brooks nodded. "What do you see?" Emma studied every detail. "His ears." Everyone looked. "They're not pulled back." She pointed again. "His tail isn't tucked either." Brooks frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means he isn't afraid." Emma took another slow step. "And he isn't grieving the way people think." She watched Shadow's breathing. Perfectly controlled. His shoulders remained tense, his eyes never left Hale. This is protective behavior. Hale cleared his throat awkwardly. "Maybe he just doesn't recognize me." Emily immediately shook her head. "That's impossible. You worked with Ryan and Shadow on dozens of operations." Hale shrugged. "Dogs forget," Emma answered before anyone else could. "Police dogs don't forget scent." The room became even quieter. Hale's smile faded slightly. Captain Brooks folded his arms. "Shadow has always liked you. He even rode in your patrol vehicle last month." "I know." Hale avoided eye contact. "I don't know what's gotten into him." At that moment, Shadow slowly climbed to his feet inside the casket. The movement startled everyone. Instead of stepping out, he carefully positioned himself between Ryan's body and the edge of the coffin. His posture was unmistakable. He was shielding his partner. Emily whispered softly, "It's like he's protecting Ryan." Dr. Carter nodded. "Exactly," but from who no one answered. The funeral director quietly approached Captain Brooks. "Should we continue the service?" Before Brooks could respond, another officer walked toward the casket carrying a folded ceremonial flag. Officer Daniel Cruz had known Shadow since puppyhood. He smiled gently. "Easy, buddy." Shadow glanced at him. His growl disappeared. Daniel carefully stopped 3 feet away. The dog remained calm. Emma noticed immediately. He isn't reacting to everyone. Captain Brooks looked surprised. "Only certain people," Emma nodded. "Watch." Daniel slowly stepped backward. Shadow relaxed slightly. Then Lieutenant Hale shifted his weight. Instantly the growl returned. Longer, lower, more intense. Several officers exchanged uneasy looks. Emily's heartbeat quickened. This can't be coincidence. Captain Brooks slowly walked toward Hale. "Marcus, were you with Ryan during his last shift?" Hale blinked. "No, I was home." Emily frowned. "I thought dispatch mentioned you were still on duty." Hale hesitated for barely a second. "I finished paperwork. Then I left." Nobody spoke. Shadow suddenly barked. One sharp bark. Not frantic, not emotional, purposeful. The sound echoed through the chapel. Several guests flinched. Children clung to their parents. The German shepherd took one careful step toward the edge of the casket. His nose lifted into the air. He inhaled deeply, then stared directly at Hale again. Emma whispered almost to herself, "He's scenting him." Captain Brooks looked confused. "Scenting. He's confirming an odor, the same way he identifies suspects." Emily slowly turned toward Hale. The lieutenant's face had become pale. A thin layer of sweat appeared across his forehead despite the cool room. "I think I should leave," Hale muttered. "No." Captain Brooks's voice became firm. "I'd rather you stayed." Hale forced a laugh. "You seriously think a dog is accusing me?" "No," Brooks replied calmly. "I think a dog is trying to tell us something." Silence settled over the chapel once again. Shadow never blinked, never looked away. For 7 years, Ryan Foster had trusted that German shepherd with his life. Now, standing over his fallen partner one final time, Shadow was asking everyone else to trust him too. Captain Ethan Brooks dismissed the guests only after the funeral service ended. Most officers quietly escorted Ryan Foster's family outside, but a small group remained inside the chapel. Emily Ross stood beside the casket, unable to stop thinking about Shadow's strange behavior. "Doctor." Emma Carter carefully observed the German shepherd, who had finally stepped out of the coffin but refused to leave Ryan's side. Shadow no longer growled. Instead, He sat beside the casket, staring toward the chapel doors where Lieutenant Marcus Hale had disappeared only minutes earlier. Emma broke the silence. "I've worked with police dogs for 15 years. Captain Brooks looked at her. And I've never seen a reaction like this. Emily folded her arms. "You really believe Shadow recognized something?" Emma nodded. "I do. What kind of something? A scent connected to trauma." Captain Brooks frowned. "You mean the warehouse?" "Exactly." She knelt beside Shadow and gently stroked his neck. "Police dogs create powerful scent memories during critical incidents. If the same odor appears again, especially one connected with violence, they react immediately." Emily exchanged a worried glance with Brooks. "You think Marcus was at the warehouse," Emma answered carefully. "I'm saying Shadow believes he was." Brooks remained silent for several seconds. Finally, he made a decision. "I want Ryan's case reopened." Emily looked surprised. "The investigation was already ruled a fatal ambush. Then we'll review everything ourselves." Within an hour, Brooks' Emily detective, Olivia Grant, and Dr. Carter gathered inside the department's investigation room. A large monitor displayed footage recovered from Ryan's body camera. Most of the recording was damaged by the explosion. Static filled the screen, broken images flashed in and out. Olivia adjusted the playback. "There's only about 3 minutes we can recover." The video began. Ryan and Shadow slowly entered the abandoned warehouse. Nothing unusual appeared at first. Then Shadow suddenly stopped. Emily leaned forward. Pause. Olivia froze the frame. Shadow wasn't looking into the darkness. He was staring toward an upper catwalk. Zoom in. The picture became grainy, almost impossible to read. Then Brooks noticed movement. A figure, a blurry silhouette, disappeared behind a steel beam. Olivia continued the recording. Ryan's flashlight swept across the warehouse. Shadow grabbed Ryan's jacket. Seconds later, gunfire erupted. The screen filled with smoke. The explosion followed. Then the recording ended. Emily slowly exhaled. He knew. Brooks nodded. Shadow tried to stop him. Emma looked toward the frozen frame again. "Go back." Olivia rewound the footage. Emma pointed toward the upper walkway. "There." "What, freeze the image?" Olivia enlarged the blurry silhouette. The face remained impossible to identify. But something else stood out. The person wore a reflective safety jacket with a distinctive silver stripe across one shoulder. Brooks frowned. Construction workers don't wear those in abandoned warehouses. Olivia opened another file. Wait. She searched the department equipment records. Several seconds later, she found what she needed. Our tactical supervisors wear identical reflective command jackets during emergency responses. Emily looked at the list. Only 4 supervisors had been issued that model. One name immediately caught everyone's attention. Lieutenant Marcus Hale. Nobody spoke. The room suddenly felt smaller. Brooks leaned back in his chair. "That doesn't prove he was there." "No," Olivia agreed. "But it proves someone wearing department-issued equipment was—" Emma looked toward Shadow lying quietly beneath the conference table. He already knew. Brooks reached for another report. Dispatch logs. Olivia opened the communication records from the night Ryan died. Ryan acknowledged the warehouse call at 9:48 p.m. Backup wasn't assigned until nearly 11 minutes later. Emily frowned. "That's impossible. Our policy requires immediate secondary response." Olivia continued reading. Another entry appeared. At 9:44 p.m., 4 minutes before Ryan accepted the call, Lieutenant Hale's patrol vehicle transmitted a location signal. Everyone leaned closer. The coordinates appeared on the digital map, directly beside Harbor Freight Warehouse. Emily looked up slowly. He said he was home. Brooks closed the file. Either Marcus lied, or someone used his vehicle. Emma quietly looked at Shadow. The German Shepherd had lifted his head. His ears pointed toward the hallway outside. Heavy footsteps approached the investigation room. A firm knock echoed against the door. Captain Brooks answered. "Come in." The handle slowly turned. The door opened. Standing outside was Lieutenant Marcus Hale. He smiled politely. "I heard you reopened Ryan's case. His eyes moved across every face in the room, then they settled on Shadow. The German Shepherd rose without hesitation, his lips curled. A deep growl filled the room once again. Lieutenant Marcus Hale stood quietly in the doorway, pretending nothing was unusual. "I heard you reopened Ryan's case," he said calmly. Captain Ethan Brooks studied him for a moment before replying. "We're reviewing every report." Marcus smiled politely. "That's understandable." Before anyone answered, Shadow stood. The German Shepherd's ears pointed straight at the lieutenant. A low growl filled the room. Marcus stopped smiling. Emily Ross watched the dog carefully. Shadow had ignored everyone else who entered the room that afternoon. Only Marcus caused this reaction. Dr. Emma Carter slowly stepped between the dog and the lieutenant. Shadow. The dog obeyed her command and remained where he was, but his eyes never left Marcus. Marcus forced another smile. "I guess he still blames me for not getting there sooner." Nobody replied. After an uncomfortable silence, he excused himself and walked away. Only when his footsteps disappeared did Shadow finally relax. Captain Brooks looked toward Olivia Grant. "I want every security camera near the warehouse." Olivia nodded. "I'll start immediately." 3 hours later, she returned carrying a tablet. "I found something." Everyone gathered around. One traffic camera had captured a dark SUV driving away from the warehouse minutes after the explosion. The license plate couldn't be read, but one detail stood out. "There." Olivia paused the image. A reflective stripe flashed beneath the headlights. Emily recognized it instantly. "The same command jacket." Brooks folded his arms. "We're getting closer." At that moment, Shadow suddenly stood again. This time, he walked to Ryan's old locker. He scratched the metal door twice. Emily looked confused. Why there Brooks unlocked it? Inside were Ryan's spare uniform, several training manuals, a flashlight, and an old leather notebook. Nothing unusual. Then Shadow sniffed the bottom shelf. He pawed at a loose wooden panel. Olivia carefully lifted it. Hidden beneath was a small flash drive sealed inside a plastic bag. Emily stared in surprise. Ryan hid this. Brooks plugged the drive into a computer. Only one video file appeared. The recording began. Ryan sat inside his patrol vehicle. His face looked tired. "If you're watching this," he said, "something has gone wrong." Everyone in the room fell silent. "I've been investigating suspicious activity inside the department." Ryan paused and looked toward the passenger seat. Shadow appeared beside him. "I don't know who I can trust anymore. I haven't reported everything because I need stronger evidence. If anything happens to me." Ryan gently rubbed Shadow's neck and followed him. The recording ended. Nobody spoke. Emily felt tears forming. He knew. Brooks nodded slowly. He expected something. Dr. Carter looked down at Shadow. The German Shepherd had already walked toward the exit. His tail remained still. His posture was confident, almost purposeful. Emily noticed first. "He's trying to show us something." Shadow looked back once. Then he continued walking. The officers followed him outside. Instead of heading toward the parking lot, Shadow crossed the street and entered a narrow alley behind the station. He moved quickly but never ran. Every few yards he lowered his nose to the pavement. Olivia whispered, "He's tracking." The alley ended near an abandoned freight yard. Old shipping containers stood in long rows covered with rust. Shadow slowed. He ignored every container except one near the far corner. Stopping in front of it, he barked sharply. Once, then again. Emily examined the heavy padlock. "It hasn't been opened in months." Shadow barked louder. Dr. Carter crouched beside him. "No." She pointed toward fresh scratches around the lock. Someone opened it recently. Brooks called for a bolt cutter. Minutes later, the lock snapped open. The steel door creaked as Emily slowly pulled it aside. Dust floated through the afternoon sunlight. Inside sat a folding table, several cardboard boxes, a city map covered with handwritten notes, and dozens of photographs pinned across the wall. Every photograph showed Ryan. Some were taken outside the station, others during patrol. One had clearly been taken outside Ryan's own home. Olivia's voice became barely a whisper. He was being watched. Shadow walked straight to the back of the container. Hidden beneath a gray tarp rested a black metal case. He placed one paw on top of it, then looked directly at Captain Brooks. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the same thing. Ryan hadn't left this evidence for investigators. He had left it for Shadow to find. Captain Brooks carefully lifted the black metal case onto the folding table. Dust covered its surface, but the combination lock had already been opened. Ryan had never intended to keep it sealed forever. Shadow sat quietly beside the table. For the first time since Ryan's death, the German Shepherd looked calm, almost relieved. "It's like he knows we've found the right place," Emily whispered. Brooks slowly opened the lid. Inside were several neatly organized folders, 3 USB drives, a digital voice recorder, and a thick notebook covered with Ryan's handwriting. Olivia immediately put on a pair of evidence gloves. "Let's document everything before touching it." Each item was photographed and labeled. The first folder contained surveillance photographs. Some showed abandoned warehouses. Others showed expensive vehicles arriving late at night. Several pictures included Lieutenant Marcus Hale speaking with men no one at the department recognized. Emily frowned. These meetings were never reported. Olivia turned another page. Every photograph had a date, time, and location written underneath. Ryan had been watching Hale for almost 4 months. The next folder contained financial records, large bank transfers, shell companies, warehouse rental agreements. Several payments had been made only days before Ryan died. Captain Brooks looked stunned. "This isn't suspicion anymore. This is an investigation." Olivia connected the digital voice recorder to her laptop. A recording began. Ryan's voice filled the container. Day 38. Marcus met the same 2 men again tonight. I couldn't get close enough to hear them, but Shadow tracked their vehicle to Harbor Freight Warehouse. The recording clicked to the next file. Day 46. Someone inside the department is warning them before every inspection. Emily looked toward Brooks. He knew there was an insider. Brooks nodded slowly. He just didn't know how many. Shadow suddenly stood. He walked to another cardboard box, resting beneath the table. Instead of barking, he gently pushed it with his nose. Olivia opened it. Inside were copies of dispatch records, patrol schedules, shift changes, radio transcripts. Ryan had highlighted several suspicious calls. Every operation involving Marcus Hale had one unusual detail. Backup units always arrived late, sometimes by only a few minutes, sometimes much longer. Emily compared the dates. They're all connected. Brooks folded his arms. Someone manipulated dispatch. Olivia reached for the final USB drive. This may explain everything. She inserted it into her computer. Only one video appeared. The file opened. Ryan stood inside his garage. Shadow rested beside him. Ryan looked directly into the camera. If you're seeing this, I probably ran out of time. Everyone remained silent. I couldn't finish gathering enough evidence, but I know Marcus isn't acting alone. Ryan unfolded a city map. He pointed toward several red circles. These locations are connected. Every shipment passed through them. The final transfer is scheduled for Friday night. Emily looked at the calendar on the wall. Friday was tomorrow. Ryan continued speaking. "If I'm gone, they'll think the investigation died with me." A faint smile crossed his face. "They'll underestimate Shadow." The German Shepherd quietly lifted his head after hearing Ryan's recorded voice. "I trained him to remember. Not commands, not tricks. Truth." Ryan reached down and scratched behind Shadow's ears. "He knows every cent connected to this case. If he leads you somewhere, follow him." The recording ended. No one moved. Captain Brooks slowly closed the laptop. "We're not waiting." Olivia nodded. "If Ryan was right, another shipment is happening tomorrow night." Emily looked toward Shadow. "What do you think, partner? Almost immediately, the German Shepherd stood. He walked to the open container door, then stopped. His ears lifted, his body became tense. Dr. Emma Carter noticed first. Someone's outside. The officers reached for their sidearms. Footsteps echoed across the empty freight yard. Slow, careful, trying not to be heard. Brooks signaled everyone to remain silent. Shadow growled softly. The footsteps stopped. For several seconds, no one breathed. Then, an engine roared to life somewhere beyond the shipping containers. Tires spun across loose gravel. A dark SUV sped toward the exit. Olivia rushed outside just in time to glimpse the rear of the vehicle disappearing through the gate. She couldn't read the license plate, but one detail caught her attention. A reflective command jacket hung over the driver's seat, the same jacket seen in Ryan's body camera footage. Captain Brooks looked toward the road. They know we found the evidence. Shadow stared at the disappearing vehicle. His ears remained forward. His mission wasn't over. It had only entered its most dangerous stage. Captain Brooks watched the SUV disappear into the darkness until its taillights vanished beyond the freight yard. They know we've recovered Ryan's evidence, he said quietly. Emily Ross closed the metal case and looked toward Shadow. The German Shepherd remained focused on the road where the vehicle had disappeared. He wants to keep going. Dr. Emma Carter nodded. He knows the trail isn't over. Back at headquarters, the investigation team worked through the night. Olivia Grant spread Ryan's maps across the conference table while Brooks compared them with current satellite images. 3 locations had already been searched. Only one remained unchecked. An abandoned freight terminal beside the old river docks. Olivia pointed at the map. Ryan circled this place 3 different times. Emily looked at the notes. He wrote, "Final transfer." Captain Brooks checked his watch. If Ryan was right, it happens tonight. Within an hour, a small tactical team quietly surrounded the abandoned terminal. No police lights, no sirens. Everyone remained hidden. Shadow sat inside the unmarked SUV beside Emily. His ears twitched constantly. The dog was unusually calm, almost as if he already knew exactly where to go. At 7 p.m., headlights appeared at the far end of the terminal. One truck. Then another. Finally, the same dark SUV rolled through the open gate. Brooks watched through binoculars. They're here. Several men stepped from the vehicles and began unloading large wooden crates. Marcus Hale climbed out of the SUV moments later. Emily stared through her scope. He really came. Brooks remained patient. Not yet. They needed stronger evidence. The smugglers rolled the crates inside an abandoned warehouse overlooking the river. Shadow suddenly stood. Without making a sound, he stared toward a narrow side entrance hidden behind stacks of rusted shipping containers. Dr. Carter noticed immediately. He's found another way inside. Brooks smiled. "Lead us." Emily unclipped Shadow's leash. The German Shepherd moved silently through the shadows. Every few seconds he paused, checking the air before continuing. The team followed only a few steps behind. The hidden entrance led into a narrow storage corridor running beside the main warehouse. Through broken windows they could clearly see the operation. The wooden crates weren't filled with ordinary cargo. Inside were military weapons, stacks of cash, and forged government documents. Olivia quietly photographed everything. This is enough. Before Brooks could signal the arrest, Shadow froze. His nose lifted. Then he turned sharply toward another hallway. Emily whispered, "What is it?" The German Shepherd ignored the warehouse completely. Instead, he hurried toward a locked office at the end of the corridor. He scratched twice at the door. Brooks carefully forced it open. Inside sat a laptop, several hard drives, and a wall covered with photographs. Ryan's photograph hung in the center. Beside it were pictures of Captain Brooks, Emily, Olivia, and nearly every officer involved in the investigation. Olivia's face turned pale. "They've been watching all of us." Shadow walked beneath the desk. Hidden behind a loose floor panel was a black notebook. Emily opened it. Every payment, every delivery, every corrupt officer, every bribe, each page was signed with initials. One set appeared more than any other. M.H. Marcus Hale. Captain Brooks closed the notebook. "We're done waiting." He pressed his radio. "Move in." Within seconds, officers stormed the warehouse from every entrance. "Police, nobody move." The smugglers scattered. Several surrendered immediately. Others tried to escape through the rear loading dock. Marcus Hale ran toward the river. Shadow exploded into motion. The German Shepherd sprinted across the warehouse floor, weaving between crates before catching Hale just as he reached the dock. Shadow leaped. His jaws locked firmly onto Hale's jacket sleeve, dragging him to the ground without causing serious injury. Hale struggled desperately. "Get this dog off me!" Shadow refused to release him until Emily arrived and gave the command, "Release!" Immediately, the German Shepherd stepped back, breathing hard. Eyes still locked on Hale. Captain Brooks placed handcuffs on the lieutenant. "It's over, Marcus." Hale lowered his head. For the first time that night, he said nothing. Marcus Hale sat silently inside the interrogation room. The confidence he had carried for months had disappeared. His wrinkled command jacket rested on the table beside him, while Captain Ethan Brooks, Detective Olivia Grant, and Emily Ross stood behind the one-way mirror. Shadow lay quietly on the floor outside the room. For the first time since Ryan Foster's death, the German Shepherd looked peaceful. Brooks entered the room carrying a thick evidence folder. He placed it on the table without saying a word. Marcus glanced at it. "You already know everything, don't you?" Brooks remained calm. "We know enough." Olivia switched on a recorder. The interview begins at 9:12 a.m. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "You won't understand." "Then help us understand," Brooks replied. For several seconds, Marcus stared at the tabletop. Finally, he sighed. "It wasn't supposed to happen." Emily's expression hardened. "What wasn't, Ryan?" Marcus rubbed his face. "He started asking questions. He kept following the shipments. He wouldn't stop." Olivia opened Ryan's notebook. "He discovered the smuggling operation." Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, but he didn't know how many people were involved." Brooks slid another photograph across the table. It showed Marcus meeting two men beside the abandoned warehouse. "Who are they?" Marcus looked away. "Middlemen. They arranged deliveries. They paid everyone." Emily spoke quietly. "And you," Marcus closed his eyes. "I made sure inspections happened somewhere else. I delayed backup. I changed patrol routes." Olivia's voice became sharper. "You sent Ryan alone." Marcus didn't answer. Brooks leaned forward. The warehouse call. Was it a trap? Silence filled the room. Then Marcus whispered, "Yes." Emily clenched her fists. "You knew he would respond." Marcus nodded. "The anonymous call was fake. We expected another officer. Ryan arrived first." Brooks looked directly into his eyes. "Who planted the explosive?" Marcus swallowed. "I didn't. One of the buyers did. They said nobody would get hurt. They lied." Emily shook her head. And afterward, Marcus lowered his voice. "They ordered me to remove the evidence. But I couldn't find everything." Shadow stayed with Ryan. He wouldn't leave. Brooks remembered the funeral, the casket, the growling, the warning. Everything suddenly made perfect sense. Marcus looked toward the window. "That dog recognized my scent. I knew the moment I walked into the chapel." Olivia folded her arms. "That's why you panicked." Marcus nodded. "I thought everyone would think he was grieving. I never imagined they'd believe him." Brooks answered quietly. "We didn't believe a dog. We believed what he led us to." The interrogation continued for another hour. Marcus revealed the names of 3 corrupt officers and 2 civilian traffickers. He identified hidden bank accounts, storage facilities, and several fake companies used to move illegal weapons across the state. Every confession matched Ryan's investigation. Every detail confirmed the evidence Shadow had helped uncover. By late afternoon, arrest teams moved across the city, search warrants were executed, computers were seized, accounts were frozen. The criminal network collapsed within a single day. News of the operation spread quickly. Television stations praised Ryan Foster's determination. But they also spoke about the remarkable German Shepherd who had refused to abandon his partner. At headquarters, Emily knelt beside Shadow. She smiled gently. "You finished his mission." Shadow looked toward Ryan's empty office. His tail moved slowly once. Captain Brooks walked over carrying Ryan's service badge. He attached it to a wooden display case that would hang permanently inside the department. Beneath it, a new brass plaque had already been engraved. It read, "Officer Ryan Foster, he never stopped fighting for the truth." Below those words was a second inscription. And neither did his partner Shadow. Emily rested one hand on Shadow's shoulder. The German Shepherd quietly looked at the memorial for the first time in many days. He closed his eyes and took a long, peaceful breath. 1 week after the arrests, Brookhaven Police Department gathered once again inside the same memorial chapel where everything had begun. This time, the atmosphere felt different. The grief had not disappeared, but it had been joined by something stronger: justice. Officer Ryan Foster's sacrifice had exposed a criminal network operating from within the department, and every person in the room understood that the truth had survived, because one loyal German Shepherd refused to give up. Captain Ethan Brooks stepped onto the stage carrying a small wooden presentation box. Inside rested Ryan's service badge, polished until it reflected the morning sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows. Beside the badge lay a new medal. The department had voted unanimously to award Shadow the Medal of Valor for extraordinary service. Emily Ross stood beside the German Shepherd, gently holding his leash. Shadow remained calm quietly, watching the people gathered before him. Dr. Emma Carter smiled softly. "I think he knows today is different." The captain began speaking. Ryan Foster believed that integrity mattered more than comfort. He believed the badge represented trust. He refused to ignore corruption even when standing alone became dangerous. Brooks paused, but Ryan was never truly alone. He looked toward Shadow. His partner stayed beside him until the very end. The entire chapel erupted into heartfelt applause. Shadow lifted his ears but remained seated. He never sought attention. He simply waited. Captain Brooks walked down from the stage and knelt beside him. With great care, he fastened the Medal of Valor onto Shadow's ceremonial harness. The German Shepherd looked up for a brief moment before turning his eyes toward Ryan's portrait. Emily felt tears forming. He still looks for him. Dr. Carter nodded quietly. Some bonds never disappear. After the ceremony, officers walked together to the department memorial garden. A newly planted oak tree stood beside a granite monument engraved with Ryan's name. Families placed flowers around its base. Children left handwritten thank you notes beside photographs of Shadow. One little boy stepped forward holding a drawing. It showed Ryan standing beside Shadow beneath a bright blue sky. Emily accepted the picture with a smile. "I'm sure Ryan would have loved this." The boy looked at Shadow. "He's still protecting people, isn't he, Emily?" Gently scratched behind the dog's ears. "Every single day." As the crowd slowly dispersed, Captain Brooks handed Emily a sealed envelope. Ryan had written it months before requesting that, if anything ever happened to him, Shadow should remain with the department. Emily unfolded the final page. It contained only one sentence: "Take care of him and he'll take care of everyone else." She folded the letter carefully. "I promise." Later that evening, the station prepared for the night shift. Patrol cars rolled out one after another. New officers greeted Shadow as they passed through the lobby. Some saluted, others simply smiled. The German Shepherd calmly watched them leave before walking toward Ryan's old office one final time. He paused outside the door, then he turned away. Captain Brooks opened the passenger door of his patrol SUV. Ready partner Shadow jumped inside without hesitation. The engine started. As the vehicle pulled away from headquarters, the setting sun painted the city in warm golden light. Ryan Foster was gone, but his courage remained alive through every officer who chose honesty over fear. Most of all, it lived inside the faithful German shepherd, who had refused to abandon the truth. Some heroes wear a badge, some carry a shield, and sometimes the bravest hero walks on four loyal paws, leaving behind a legacy that no darkness can ever silence.